Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome to the second episode of this new series, The Faith Book, A Journey Through Ideology, where we seek to explore our purpose in this universe. And if there's a creator, and what are the characteristics of this creator if he exists. Inshallah, we'll be discussing the book that we're going to use over the next couple of episodes, the book called Haqqul Yaqeen. But before we dive into this, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest, Sheikh Muhammed Abbas Panju. Sheikh, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you doing tonight?
Alhamdulillah wa shukr. It's always an honor to be with you, and it's always an honor to be on air with the channel.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, Sheikhna, last week we discussed the importance of the 5 fundamental principles of monotheism in general. And we also discussed the importance of going into ilm al-Aqaid.
Of course.
But I'd like to look at the book that we're going to use, the book called Haqqul Yaqeen. Why specifically that book?
This definitely a very good question. And, from last week, if you don't mind, before going into the title of the book we've selected and the reasoning behind this book, is that the definition of usuluddin or ilm al-aqaid, as we mentioned last week by way of recap, it is the science of establishing the 5 core principles of our faith, of monotheism, through proof and evidence that necessitates to absolute certainty. Yani it's a science in which proof and evidence is analyzed, is studied, and then based on the strength of this evidence, the conclusion, either the conclusion is accepted or rejected. In the case of ilm al-usul, ilm al-kalam or aqaid, the proof that is presented to us is so convincing and irrefutable such that the end result is absolute certainty. And if you have absolute conviction and certainty, firmness in your faith and belief, then you are strong in your iman as a person. You do not waver, you do not give up your faith, abandon your faith, because that belief is so strongly tied into you.
Of course.
So having said this, the goal of the program is to go through and to study the science of usuluddin or aqaid, as we said, using the standard text or using a text known as Haqqul Yaqeen. Now, the good thing again, as we may have pointed last week, one thing that stands out with Haqqul Yaqeen, number one, it's a book that is being very highly advised by the ulama and the mujtahideen within Hawzat Najaf al-Ashraf. And it has been from the advice of the ulama to study this book carefully, based on the fact that it is a book whose principles are very clearly outlined. The methodology in establishing usuluddin is very concise, is very clear, is free of any shubuhat, any doubts, or any sort of false conclusions. So you can say that it is a version of authenticated, verified text, which you can go back for safe analysis and conclusions, unlike a book that may misguide you on the way. Looking into the book Haqqul Yaqeen, the format of the book, in that the author comes down when it comes to establishing proof for each and every one of these faculties that we want to analyze, Tawheed, Adala, Nabuwa, Imama, and Ma'ad. He uses a very systematic approach where you have 3 categories or 2 categories of proof. Dalil Aqli, yani proof that is intellectual, free and independent of any textual proof. Or you can say proof that even if it is supported from text, it is something that the human intellect accepts and submits. The second one is Dalil Naqli. Dalil Naqli, yani proof from the Quran and proof from Ahlul Bayt. Now it is very important to state over here that when we have this categorization of Dalil Aqli and Dalil Naqli, it doesn't mean that the Quran is in direct opposition to the intellect, such that you need two opposite sources of proof to establish. Rather, if we look into the Quran, you will see that when it comes to the issue of proving the existence of God, and you use the Quran, you find that the Quran is actually addressing the intellect. When verses of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and contemplate over the creation of day and night. If you were to ponder over this concept of this system of day and night, and how the earth is rotating over through its axis, and then it has a system of revolving within this entire universe, the rotation of the earth and the revolution of the earth revolving around the sun, and so on and so forth. When a person starts to analyze this, the intellect in itself is equipped with enough strength to comprehend the fact that there is a creator behind this universe. Yani the intellect as a faculty has the ability to comprehend this. Having a look at the system of creation, for example, looking at the cycle of, for example, the plant kingdom, the mind is able to use the system of the plant kingdom to establish life after death through resurrection. Yani the mind has that ability and that capability to do so. So for example, you find that how the trees shed their leaves during the winter seasons, how many plants die during the winter season, if you could use the word die in inverted commas. But then you find that when the spring season comes up and the summer starts to come in, suddenly these trees that were dead now suddenly start to sprout out with life. The leaves start to grow back, and the fruit starts to grow from the earth. And this example of the cycle of life within a plant kingdom, the intellect upon contemplation is able to use this as a proof and then establish the reality of life after death. For the intellect, as the intellect has this ability. So one good thing about this book, Haqqul Yaqeen, is that the author uses dalil aqli together with dalil naqli. Naqli being yani from the Quran, but as important hadith of Ahlul Bayt. And you find that taking the teachings of Usuluddin from Ahlul Bayt is an absolutely important concept which the Ahlul Bayt themselves have emphasized on to great degrees. Yani you find that they have given us guidance into the characteristics of the scholars through whom you're supposed to seek ilm. This is how in-depth the issue of Usuluddin is. A person may come and tell you, why is it that I cannot take knowledge in regards to Usuluddin from Greek philosophers, for example, or from Orientalists, for example. Why is it that I have to go through Ahlul Bayt?
Well, I wanted to ask you as a sort of a subtopic, topic. What, because you said that the Ahlul Bayt stressed on the importance of taking the hadith from the right place. Why is it important, just for the viewers watching right now, why is it important that we take the hadith from the right sources, such as, for example, Kitab al-Kafi, Bihar al-Anwar?
The idea is that the scholars are the trustees of the legacy left behind for us by Ahlul Bayt. So to clarify on this point, let me take by way of example some hadith from Usulul Kafi, where you find that there is importance and there is emphasis on who we should take the knowledge from. And all of this is introduction to assert why we're using this blessed text known as Haqqul Yaqeen. If we were to come to Usulul Kafi, for example, we have a hadith. This is Usulul Kafi volume 1 by Sheikh Kulaini rahmatullah alayh, and there are a number of scholars and ulama who have actually written commentaries on Usulul Kafi. You see, reading Usulul Kafi and reading the text of the hadith is one thing, but actually understanding what the hadith means, interpreting the hadith correctly, deducing the right conclusions from the hadith is perhaps even more important than reading the hadith itself.
Of course.
One of our greatest problems in the communities in which we live is that every Tom, Dick and Harry wants to interpret hadith however he likes. Where you find that ulama have come forward, and there are many commentaries that have been written. We have Alama Majlisi rahmatullah alayh, he's authored Mir'at al-Uqul, for example, commentary. We have this one that is that I'm using over here, Sharh Usul al-Kafi, is authored by a contemporary scholar, Alama Sayyid Ja'far Hussein al-Shirazi. In this hadith, we have time to go over the hadith, inshaAllah?
Yeah, definitely.
In this hadith, volume 1 of Usulul Kafi, and this is under the chapter on the obligation of seeking knowledge.
Okay.
Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam comes forward and he says, we will not go through the sanad because it is not the goal of tonight. سمعت أمير المؤمنين دراوي سمعت أمير المؤمنين يقول أيها الناس اعلموا أن كمال الدين طلب العلم والعمل به. Amir al-Mu'mineen says perfection in religion is sought through seeking knowledge and working upon that knowledge, putting that knowledge into practice. The hadith goes on, and it's quite a long hadith, but towards the end, and this is our point that we want to make, Amir al-Mu'mineen says وَالْعِلْمُ مَخْزُونٌ عِنْدَ أَهْلِهِ. Knowledge is a hidden treasure, makhzoon. It is a hidden treasure in the ahlih, which is in the possession of the scholars. In the ahlih, yani ahlil ilm. Who is the ahlil ilm? The people who are the possessors of the knowledge, the scholars. Be careful not to go to any layman and get the teachings of your religion from people who are based on opinion. La, you go to the mutakhassis, you go to the one who is specialized in this. And then look at what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. وَقَدْ أُمِرْتُمْ بِطَلَبِهِ مِنْ أَهْلِهِ. You have been commanded to seek knowledge from the right sources, from the scholars. So therefore, we understand over here that Amir al-Mu'mineen not only places importance on the concept of seeking knowledge, and if you were to read within the chapter of Usul al-Kafi, the importance of seeking knowledge, you find you have so many hadith, perhaps you are familiar with them, hadith on authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, where he says, talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli muslimin wa muslima. Seeking knowledge is an obligation. It's not a joke. Farida, wajib.
Of course.
Wajib upon every man and woman. But you find that in addition to the emphasis on seeking knowledge, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, as important as that is who you seek the knowledge from.
That's a very interesting point you make, because a lot of us seek knowledge,
right?
But we don't know where to seek it from. Anyone can dress up as a scholar,
of course.
And Sheikh, before you answer that, we are going to go for a quick break, and inshallah when we come back we can let the Sheikh answer that. Please stay tuned for the next part. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for joining me in the second part. I just want to remind the viewers at home that we are taking in calls if you want to ask the Sheikh a question on 0203 515 0199. So, Sheikh, before the break, I asked you how we can determine who's a legitimate scholar and who is a false scholar, because anyone can come out and claim that they are a legitimate scholar when they really aren't. So how do we make sure that the information we're getting is from a legitimate person?
Definitely. It's a very important question, and it's a very necessary question, particularly in the turbulent times that we live. And perhaps this is one of the tools and one of the weapons of shaitan, to ensure that if he is going to misguide the believers, he would misguide them through people who misuse the clothes of the scholars. And in reality, Habibi Minhal, this question in itself is an entire discussion, because the Imams have gone into in-depth guidance to warn us on what characteristics to look out for. You can recognize the misleading scholar through certain characteristics. And there are a lot of these hadith granted by Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, so on and so forth. Today, to answer the question, which I believe this hadith that touches upon it is the root cause, and inshallah it is sufficient for the question, and we move on with the rest of the text. However, hadith again from Kitab Usul al-Kafi, right, where hadith is on authority of Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, an as-Sakuni an Abi Abdullah. Abi Abdullah yani Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who narrates on authority of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. He says, al-fuqaha'u umana'ur rusul. The fuqaha, the scholars, are the guardians, umana or rusul. They are the guardians and the trustees of the prophets, of the men sent by Allah Azza wa Jal, divine men. They are the trustees.
Okay.
This, number one, shows you the value and the importance of a scholar. It's number one. However, this status is not unrestricted, is not unconditional, it's conditional. Rasulullah goes on to say, al-fuqaha umana ur-rusul ma lam yadkhulu fi dunya. Ma lam yadkhulu fi dunya yani shart. It is a condition, it's a conditional statement. So long as they are not entrenched or engulfed by the dunya. Ajib. A scholar who is entrenched and engulfed in the dunya? Yes. Qila, Ya Rasulallah, wa ma dukhuluhum fi dunya. He said, Ya Rasulullah, what do you mean? A scholar who is a trustee and a guardian of the knowledge of the previous prophets and the imams, what do you mean he's entrapped and engulfed by the dunya?
Ajib.
Ajib. Qal, ittiba'u sultan. He says, when you find فَإِذَا فَعَلُوا ذَلِكَ فَحْذَرُوهُمْ عَلَى دِينِكُمْ. Rasulullah says, yani Imam al-Sadiq through the saying of Rasulullah says, yani the sign of this are the scholars who blindly follow the ruling regimes of the time.
Okay.
Ittiba'u sultan.
Wow.
Scholars who have become slaves of governmental institutions, scholars who are slaves to dictatorial regimes. Yani the words are cut clear. Ittiba'u sultan.
Subhanallah.
فَإِذَا فَعَلُوا ذَلِكَ. If you see this, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, فَحْذَرُوهُمْ عَلَى دِينِكُمْ. Hadar, yani be cautious. Be cautious of them in regards to your religion.
Yeah.
Why? You see the answer, and it's very logical. When you have scholars who are the servants of a regime or of a dictator, then they will always interpret and reinterpret religious texts in order to satisfy those dictators or those people in power.
Yeah.
Because if he has aligned himself with them, then the interpretation of text will be in accordance to the agenda of the regime or the dictator of the time.
So to keep them in power.
Ahsantum. So what happens is now the scholar becomes the religious figure that warrants the legitimacy of the dictator. So what happens is the interpretation of the religion is not for the sake of religion, but to protect your own materialistic, dunyawi, temporary gains.
So to basically, for the alim to make sure that the leader who's currently there fits the criteria of so-called Islam.
Ahsantum. And how much have we seen this? Not only in history, but even in this day and age. Yani, you find that during that, and this was a strategy that was used from the time of Bani Umayyah and Bani Abbas. You had Bani Abbas would actually pay scholars to go out and religiously legitimize the empire of Bani Abbas.
Yeah, definitely.
Giving religious legitimacy. This is one thing. And then there are those, so this comes down into many aspects. But the root cause of this is be careful of the alim as Hotbird dunya.
Of course.
Because he interprets the religion as per his desires, as per his shahwa, as per his likings of what is correct and what is not, based upon how connected he is with the dunya. So for this, you find that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, be very careful that you take your knowledge from a person whose interpretation of the religion is not affected or distorted by the dunya and the events of the dunya. You say the truth and give the teachings of the religion as is. And that's why you find that the ulama of the Shia, even from except in cases in which there is an istithna, during the time of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, but you find majority of the times the companions of the imams who were the scholars, yani the scholars, fuqaha, the likes of Zurara and Hisham, they are never part of the government of Bani Abbas.
Of course.
There were certain cases, Ali ibn Yaqtin, who were exceptions, and that even because there was the idn khassa from the imam. This is a situation or a discussion that is different. But generally, rule of thumb, this is the guidance that is given to us. It's so important. You know, sometimes you see that Habibi bin Hal, when we want to buy something online, you know, we're going to be so careful before you put in your credit card details on a website. Is this a scam? What is the refund policy? You know, if I'm buying a pair of Nike trainers, are they legit? Are they knockoffs? Are they second hand? Are they brand new? Yani 1001 questions to find out if this thing is accurate or not, trustworthy or not. Subhanallah, for a thing that is materialistic. So now imagine about our deen. I think we have a caller on.
Yeah, we have a caller on the line. Assalamu alaikum. Could you please state your name and where you're calling from?
My name is Ahmed and I'm calling from Bradford.
And your question for the Sheikh, please.
The book, how can we confirm that this book is legitimate as it was written over 200 years ago?
Right.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much for your question. Sheikh.
Ahsantum. The brother's name was Ahmed?
Ahmed from Bradford.
Ahmed from Bradford. Number one, thank you for calling and thank you for asking the question. It's a very valid question. It shows that Brother Ahmed is familiar with the text because the author himself lived just close to 200 years. This book, Hakul Yaqeen. The question here is that how can you verify the authenticity of the book even though it was written 200 years ago?
Of course.
Right? And it's a good question. However, it shows that just because, to clarify one misconception that may be in the mind consciously or subconsciously, just the fact that text is written 200 years ago does not mean that it's not credible.
Of course.
The fact that the book is ancient, the fact that the book is ancient doesn't necessitate the uncredibility of the book. Right? In fact, it should give us more confidence. However, what we can say is to answer Ahmed's question, even though the book was written 200 years ago, we have a number of our ulama from the Maraj al-Taqlid, generation after generation, who certified and verified this book, Haqqul Yaqeen, authored by Allama Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar, as being a text, Rahmatullah alayh, as being a text that is suitable for preliminary studies and learning and Aqaid, your concept of Aqaid, Usuluddin, through manners that are legitimate and correct, generation after generation. In fact, one of the ulama were telling me that the text Haqqul Yaqeen, it used to be used within the Muqaddamat, within the Muqaddimat in Najaf al-Ashraf for the longest time ever. When they used to study Usuluddin, they used to use Haqqul Yaqeen as a standard text for you know, many years inside of Najaf al-Ashraf. So the reliance of the ulama who are udul mujtahideen, who are on the right path, their attestation of the book gives us that credibility, confidence.
You mentioned the author's name, which
Yes.
is what I really want to touch upon.
Sure.
Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar, rahmatullah
Right.
alayh.
Rahmatullah alayh.
Could you just give us a brief background on who Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar was, please?
Sayyid Abdullah ibn Muhammad Rida Shabbar is a family that is known for its ilm and for its taqwa and its piety in Najaf al-Ashraf inside of Iraq. The author was born in 1188 AH.
Okay.
And he passed away in 1242 AH. We are just now in 1439, so give or take 190 odd years, 195, 197 years back, 200 years ago.
Okay.
And one of the things that in regards to the scholarship of Sayyid Allama Abdullah Shabbar, number one, he was Marja Taqlida. He had a Risala Amaliya of his own. He had Muqallidin during that time.
Okay.
He was from one of the students of Allama Sheikh Ja'far Kashif al-Ghita,
Oh, okay.
from his students. And this was a family that was known for their taqwa. In fact, within his autobiography, it is narrated, or it is stated that Allama Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar, his father, Sayyid Muhammad Rida Shabbar, was so strict that he would actually not let Sayyid Abdullah eat
Wow.
on that day if he didn't spend the day studying in the way of Ahlul Bayt and to serve Islam. Because he says all our expenses are paid by hukuk. And for us to be deserving of hukuk, we need to be in the service of Ahlul Bayt. And in fact, one day, they actually saw Sayyid Abdullah Shabbar selling stationery outside the madrasa. They asked him, Sayyid Abdullah, what is this you're doing? He's saying, today because I was sick, I was not able to dedicate my time towards studying for Ahlul Bayt. I do not see myself sufficient of the money from the hukuk to eat my livelihood. So I'm selling this stationery so I can feed myself.
Wow.
Family, get taqwa. Taqwa to this daraja. When I know people of these characters authoring books such as these,
definitely.
I have that confidence in addition to the content in itself.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Sheikh, man. Thank you very much for the viewers for tuning into the second episode of the Faithbook, A Journey Through Ideology. Inshallah, we'll see you next week at 9 p.m. on Wednesday with Sheikh Muhammed, Abbas, Panju, and as we seek to go further deep into Haqqul Yaqeen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.